Saskia, welcome.
Pleasure.
To start with, what is Critical Inquiry Lab? It sounds critical.
Well, let's aim that we can help find youngsters their criticality. And it was already mentioned in the previous conversation that design is expanding quite rapidly. There's an acknowledgement that design is very much rooted in a Western canon, in modernity, which comes with colonizing, which comes with preemptive gender roles. And what we teach our students is, in fact, to extend their judgment, to really delve into deep time, to hook onto the word time that you mentioned, because, of course, when we think about journalism, it has the word jour, day, and the acceleration of information was already mentioned. So I would say that one of the bigger challenges is to really stay with certain questions underpinning our environment. And I believe that a lot of that we live is in fact designed. We live in a designed environment, material and immaterial. That means we could alter the systems, the processes that we call our daily reality, our daily lives. And that's what I hope to educate.
When you say we live in a designed environment, but buildings are being designed, clothes are being designed, I understand. But are you also saying that our thoughts, our concepts are being designed?
Well, I mean, you're now touching straight away onto one of the, let's say, leading topics, what we would call subjective capitalism, where the self is indeed designed. Either consciously or unconsciously. This pans out into many different philosophical streams, but maybe touching on, let's say, the idea of production, and how production gives a sense of existential rigor, or the idea of the quantified self, that we look at the self through optimization of the body or the mind. Notions of the cyborg, of course, have entered the discourse via Donna Haraway, where we optimize, well, how we see. So it's not only far away, but the idea of the techne, the technology, which was already emphasized earlier on, obviously plays an important role. And yes, that's, let's say, it questions a little bit notions of, yeah, let's say, truisms, for lack of a better word.
I see. We've seen some works passing already in what you are doing. Are you satisfied with the works you've seen, or because I remember you said somewhere that we really need to change the journalistic systems that we have grown accustomed to. Are the works that you've seen up till now, are they doing that, or is there more you have in mind? When does the revolution start?
Yesterday. No, I'm hoping that, well, I think if we look at the planetary system, and you don't have to be a huge theoretician to understand that the way we organize life at the moment is unjust, is going to cause a lot of problems, and the points on the horizon are there. We read it in the newspaper every day. I was quite struck that I was asked to speak about journalism. It was on invitation of Daniela Aretz. She's a tutor at one of the leading schools on journalism. And I was interested to think about, let's say, the true infiltration of technology into, let's say, the idea of how we absorb information on a day-to-day basis and how we understand, how legible are the codes. We are being confronted with information already from very early on. But it seemed to me that the amount of resistance to looking for civic values, for societal, I mentioned truisms already, without being too narrow casting on that. If we see what happened now with the journalist of Belarus hijacked if we see what happened in Gaza with there's apparently quite some fear of the potential of proper information. What proper information could do is possibly, and here I'm going a bit in a wide stroke maybe, but shift our quite consumer and passive attitude to a more active and engaged attitude. And this also talks back to what you said earlier.
So are you saying we should, as citizens, be more aware of the power we have once we inform ourselves, and once we use that information, is that what you're saying?
Exactly, yeah. I would even say that it is our civic duty to try to understand why riots occur, or if there's a Black Lives Matter, what is truly going on there. Don't just look behind the surface, extend your judgment.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And now it seems like a bit of a moot question, but how can design play a role in this?
Well, in the extended version of design that I dare to embrace, I've come across so many talented, engaged, young, civic, active, but also poetic souls that in fact find something that really makes them tick, and they delve in very, very deep, and they visualize it, and they give us a portal to understand situations, or to feel situations, or to reconnect to others. So there's a vast amount of young and also older people globally trying to reenact what it means to be an active citizen, and what the role of design can play, in fact, to feel, I would nearly say, more human, to humanize us again.
I remember when we talked before you came here, we had a conversation over the phone, and you said that you were born in Iraq, and that somehow, or possibly, changed the way you look at Western media, journalism, etc. Could you go a bit into that? I mean, for how long did you live in Iraq?
Well, maybe just to rephrase it, my early years were spent in Dar es Salaam in East Africa, and after that we moved. And after that we moved to Iraq. I was not expecting to talk about myself on that sense, but what I can say is that quite recently I've come to understand how influential it has been for me to live among very different cultures, and to bring that back home, and through the lens of the idea of the frame, intentionally or non-intentionally, people are being stereotyped. The work of Alice obviously points at that point. So we are being othered through the media to a certain extent. And again, there's people that benefit from these divisional practices. Right. And for me, that has been an incentive to delve deeper in the cultural potential of reconnecting us with others.
Okay. Like Angelique, you also asked us to select some works. I suggest we look at them, and you might tell us what they are about. Let's start with Rachel Moron, maybe without introduction.
It is said that everything is the same. Everything looks the same, feels the same, acts the same, and enacts the same gestures. It is said that the most interesting content occurs when users repeat. Like learning to speak, you imitate those around you in order to become. Now, relations are made by the pressing of a few buttons. Control-C, Control-V, space and enter. There is no artistic, scientific or political activity which is not aimed at it. For there is a general desire to be endlessly remembered, and endlessly repeatable, and no everyday activity which does not aspire to be photographed, filmed, videotaped, or described. Their letters, phrases, and gestures are yours too.
Rachel Moron, what did we see?
We watched a very small snippet of a documentary she's worked on, and she has been investigating the idea of the template. Now, the template, of course, when the computer came about, was as a tool to design your own websites. I don't know if you... I think we're both old enough to remember. So this idea was rooted in the internet being a platform for disseminating larger and smaller stories. And through that, then later on, the template, in fact, let's say, in the discourse was cornered a little bit towards a derogative, and even the internet at large, I would say, has been stuck a little bit in the larger discussion that the big tech is dominating all its potentiality. So I jokingly have called this the Gutenberg press on steroids, because it shows us how, on the one hand, one aspect of this work is that she questions very much this idea of the burden of autonomy. Wouldn't it be much nicer to think about what do we have in common, because we learn through mirroring each other also. And obviously the second aspect is she looked at TikTok and all these more popular platforms to understand how we could use them and generate, let's say, an empowering tool out of them.
Okay. We just continue with, and we can start it, and you can talk because there is no sound. This is the work by the French artist Maxime Benvenuto, and these are stills of an exhibition he did in the Van Abbe Museum in Eindhoven.
Maxime is a designer, writer, researcher and moderator, and here you see one of his installations, the Political Atlas of Alibaba, which was framed in a larger exhibition entitled Geodesign. That's part of the exhibition series that the Design Academy is engaged in, with Martina Muzzi as the curator. And they try to shed light on large systems. So Alibaba, of course, the supermarket online. In this case, he was struck by an image, this initial image he found in 2017, where the CEO of Alibaba, Jack Ma, visited the Greek Prime Minister. And that sort of got him analyzing and questioning how does a corporate person engage in national government politics and policies. And this is how he started to archive all the, let's say, relational encounters that Jack Ma has had, resulting in these 300 articles. He was a bit restricted by language, but he started to analyze and found out that these conversations were, of course, about making deals, but also about visas, about women enterprises, the internet as an infrastructure. He was, of course, the person, the postillon d'amour, to reflect on the 5G network. Well, nowadays I think people know what it's about, but it's like the second Silk Road. So in a way, he just, by showing it towards an audience, wanted to sort of emphasize that question, should sovereignty not mean that governments speak to each other, or what does it mean when we cross-contaminate these worlds? The last piece you picked is by an artist from Georgia, not the American state, but the country Georgia. The artist is Irakli Sabekia. I think this short film speaks for itself.
My name is Irakli Sabekia. For my graduation project, I'm addressing a big problem in Georgia. A big part of the country is occupied by Russia since 2008. In this occupied land, villages are being burned down and completely erased in an attempt to rewrite history. My project subverts the very weapon of occupation, which is the razor wire fence, into a tool of voicing a protest against itself. By connecting to it, my radio transmitter uses it as an antenna, and through this antenna broadcasts the names and the coordinates of the disappeared villages. So my intention in this project was to demonstrate an active approach rather than staying a passive observer, because this is very important for the whole community, but it's also important for me personally because it's part of my story.
What is the importance of these kind of works?
Well, to me, I find it's a very poetic work. Also within the graduation show, a lot of people resonated with it because it had a certain softness, and with your own shade, you would in fact see the villages of people that had disappeared. And in order to visualize how histories are being rewritten or how people are being muted, are not given a voice, is in fact something extremely important, I would say, to I think Simone mentioned the idea of democracy. Well, if we don't even have a voice anymore to speak, And he visualizes that in a very beautiful way. And the second aspect I wanted to point out is that he introduces the radio. And I see a lot of young designers embracing radio. We talk about all different technologies. We haven't truly mentioned radio. I'm a big fan, but that's beside the point. This quite light medium obviously also decentralizes, light in the sense of financial means, but enables, let's say, a platform for voices that are otherwise unheard. And it is interesting that the younger generation is embracing radio again as a medium.
And podcasts, of course.
Of course.
Now, to conclude with you, Saskia, we both share an interest and admiration for the research agency Forensic Architecture. It has been mentioned already several times. Let's first watch the interview I pre-recorded with one of the people working for Forensic Architecture, Bob Trafford. And I would like to point out that he introduces himself briefly and then explains how they tried to solve a murder in Turkey.
So forensic architecture is a number of things. As you've outlined, we're a research agency based here at the University of London, where we conduct human rights investigations with and on behalf of communities affected by state violence, corporate violence, environmental racism, colonial legacies. We're really an organization that wants to put innovative technical skill of the kinds that you've just started to outline in the service of communities and individuals who are struggling against oppressive and repressive violence.
What kind of research methods do you use?
Forensic architecture is a child of the open source revolution in many ways. So the information and communication revolution that happened around 2008, 2009, when social media and the mass availability of smartphones and cloud storage changed the way that we all began to communicate. And at the same time, huge geopolitical events like the Arab Spring, subsequently the Syrian civil war, changed the way that we understood conflict reporting, for example.
Could you briefly give some examples of some recent projects you worked on or projects you're proud of?
Let's talk about the killing of Taha Elchi. This is a case that you and I talked about before, right?
On the 28th of November 2015, just before 11 a.m., Taha Elchi, a prominent Kurdish human rights lawyer, was fatally shot while giving a press conference. In 2016, the Diyarbakir Bar Association asked Forensic Architecture to conduct a technical investigation using the evidence passed to them by the public prosecutor. We examined visual, spatial, and acoustic material to determine who could be considered a suspect. The incident was captured by 4 cameras. Videos 1, 3, and 4 were filmed by journalists covering the press conference. One video, from camera 2, was recorded by a policeman tasked with gathering intelligence. We synchronized the 4 cameras by identifying the same distinct sound patterns in each video and aligning them to one another. We adjusted and verified the synchronization with the help of visual details such as this cat, and by matching the movements of people's legs. The synchronized footage allowed us to view particular moments during the scene from different perspectives. When the incident began, the cameramen turned their cameras away from Elchi and towards the 2 PKK militants. Crucially, despite being just a few meters away from Elchi, none of them visually captured the precise moment that he was shot. As the killing took place off-camera, we needed to reconstruct that part of the scene by other means. First, we narrowed the time period in which the fatal shot could have taken place, by examining the videos frame by frame. Every second of footage in our investigation is made up of 25 frames. We found the last frame in which Elchi is seen standing to mark the beginning of the time period. We then found the first frame in which Elchi can be seen lying on the ground to mark the end of the time period of our investigation. We narrowed the time period further by identifying the sound of the last gunshot within it. The time period of our analysis was thus reduced to 9 seconds and 10 frames. We built a precise model of the site using architectural plans and elevations of Yannikappa Street produced by the Diyarbakir Chamber of Architects, as well as satellite images of the area. We located and oriented the 4 cameras within our model. This allowed us to establish the location of each of the actors. 5 of the policemen seen shooting, labelled A, B, C, D, and E, the PKK militants referred to as Runner 1 and Runner 2, and Elchi, in the last position he was seen alive. Using camera mapping, we were also able to locate the movements of these actors. The movement of the cameramen, of policeman B, of the 2 armed runners as they run past the scene, and of policeman A, and policemen C, D, and E, who fired at the runners throughout. An armoured vehicle arrived at the scene 12 minutes after the incident. Vehicle parked directly next to Elchi's body. From this photograph, we established the precise position of Elchi's body after he was shot. Using this position as a starting point, we set out to estimate where Elchi could have been when he was shot. According to the official autopsy report, Elchi was hit by a single bullet, which entered through the lower left side of his skull and exited just above his left eyebrow. According to Dr. Umit Picher, an independent forensic pathologist, wounds and scratch marks on Elchi's face and hands suggest that he did not try to resist the fall. Therefore, the bullet must have killed him or rendered him unconscious instantly. The direction of the scratch marks and the position of the body on the ground indicate that Elchi was shot from up Yannikappa Street in this direction. Dr. Picher suggests that when he was struck, Elchi could have been standing up to 1 meter back from the position of his body on the ground. Using this range, we reviewed the footage again to further narrow the time period in which Elchi could have been killed. Camera 2 is the first to turn towards the columns of the minaret. It captures a space between 2 of the columns from 7 seconds and 12 frames to the end of the time period at 9 seconds and 10 frames. Had Elchi been struck while camera 2 was pointed in this direction, we would have been able to see his body moving or falling between the 2 columns. Therefore, he must have fallen to the ground before this footage was captured. To corroborate this assessment, we reconstructed the motion and orientation of this camera in our 3D model, while also simulating Elchi's possible location. The simulation confirms that if Elchi had passed by the 2 columns during this time, he would have been filmed by camera 2. This further reduced the time period of the investigation to 7 seconds and 12 frames and ruled out 10 of the 40 gunshots.
You know, what we see in that case is not only a really remarkable story, a really remarkable case to begin with, but also a very clear example of the possibility for civil society open source investigative work to not only prompt a state's judicial system, but to improve the quality of that judicial process, to feed into that work and to enhance the pursuit of accountability in that case.
The whole reconstruction done by forensic architecture, you can see either on our website, designalism.nl, or on YouTube. I think the whole reconstruction is in about 25 minutes, and it is stunning. And the results of the reconstruction are being used in the court case that is running now in Turkey. Saskia, is this, these are architects trying to solve a murder? Is this where journalism should be heading for?
Well, I would say there are multiple ways where we could head for, but I mean, time and resources have been mentioned quite a bit. And if I would have to answer, I will totally mention the opposite of their, let's say, jurisdictional approach, because we have already mentioned that I'm a deep admirer of their work. I would say maybe journalism could go really towards situated knowledge and not talk about people, but with people. That would be, I think, a great way forward.
Okay, thank you, Saskia.